Good morning. We continue our hymn of grateful praise, and today we look at after giving thanks from the Gospel of John, the 6th chapter, verses 5 through 23. Remind you that the Gospel of John is trying to portray something different than the Synoptic Gospels in identifying Christ as the one and the same with God. And so there are two levels that you'll find John, the literal level, and then there's a spiritual level that goes along with it, that sometimes is not as plain as the literal level. At the beginning, where we pick the scripture up today, beginning the 5th verse of the 6th chapter, there has been about 5 or 6 months that have transpired between the end of the 5th chapter and the beginning of the 6th chapter. And the reason for that is that John did not see that as necessary to tell his story. And so he eliminates that part of Jesus' ministry, which includes the Sermon on the Mount and many of the parables. As I said, John's primary purpose, that Jesus is God incarnate. The feeding of the 5,000, which is the first part of this scripture today, is in all 4 Gospels. So this was obviously something that was very important to all of the Gospel writers. And so let's look at our scripture today. Jesus looked up and saw the large crowd coming toward him. He asked Philip, "Where will we buy food to feed these people?" Jesus said this to test him, for he already knew what he was going to do. Philip replied, "More than half a year's salary worth of food wouldn't be enough for each person to have even a little bit." One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said, "A youth here has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good is that for a crowd like this?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass there. They sat down, about 5,000 of them. Then Jesus took the bread. When he had given thanks, he distributed it to those who were sitting there. He did the same with the fish, each getting as much as they wanted. When they had had plenty to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather up the leftover pieces, so that nothing will be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the fish and barley loaves that had been left over by those who had eaten. When the people saw that he had done a miraculous sign, they said, This is truly the prophet who is coming into the world." Jesus understood that they were about to come and force him to be their king, so he took refuge again alone on the mountain. When evening came, Jesus' disciples went down to the lake. They got into a boat and were crossing the lake to Capernaum. It was already getting dark and Jesus hadn't come to them yet. The water was getting rough because a strong wind was blowing. When the wind had driven them out for about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the water. He was approaching the boat and they were afraid. He said to them, "I am. Don't be afraid." Then they wanted to take him into the boat, and just then the boat reached the land where they had been heading. The next day, the crowd that remained on the other side of the lake realized that only one boat had been there. They knew Jesus hadn't gone with his disciples, but that the disciples had gone alone. Some boats came from Tiberias, near the place where they had eaten the bread over which the Lord had given thanks. I found it interesting that in looking in the commentaries about this, researching it a bit, that Jesus' selection of Philip to Philip approaches Jesus and says that they don't have enough food for them. And Philip's selection here is from the fact that they were near Bethsaida, which is where Philip's hometown was. So if anybody was going to know how to feed these people, it would be Philip. And Jesus addresses him, and Philip replies that a half a year's salary worth of food wouldn't be enough for each person to have a little fill. Well, there are two problems here. One is money. They don't have the money to buy the food. And number two, even if they had the money, out here in the sticks, so to speak, going to Bethsaida, there wouldn't have been enough food to buy to feed all of these people. So the only way that they're going to get fed is Jesus' intervention. I also found it interesting in William Barclay's commentary that he offers up a possibility that in some ways diminishes the miracle. In other ways, it just puts it into a different form. And Barclay puts forth the idea that the people coming out to Jesus, that this little boy with his 5 small barley loaves and his 5 fish think sardines when he says he had 5 small fish, wasn't the only one that brought food out. And in Barclay's commentary, his putting forth this idea is that Jesus, in holding up the offering of this little boy, it served to shame all of these people who had brought food along and were hoarding it and weren't going to share it. And so when he holds this up, then everybody brings forth their food and starts sharing it. And think cover dish supper. There's always more than enough there.
Jesus didn't shame people into action.
Disturb their conscience. That's just what Barclay is putting forth.
I know. And this is what Jenny's putting forth.
He encouraged for the goodness to come out in people to share what they had.
I just put this out there. I thought that was interesting. I had not seen that before. Any commentary along those lines. There's a lot of practical possibilities there. Doesn't diminish the fact that if Jesus had not intervened, the people would not have been fed. The 12 baskets, the word for the basket that's used there is a type of collapsible basket that many people carried with them all the time. It was a type of basket that could be collapsed flat and therefore easily transported or carried about your person.
Be more like a canvas bag type thing?
Yeah.
Because I was wondering the same thing. Why would anybody want to carry baskets if they're traveling to listen to evangelist, and you're going to carry a basket and travel 15, 20 miles and carry something that you really don't need to carry with you?
You're mentioning the canvas bag. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you think of the reusable store bags.
Right.
That you get from Walmart or Food Lion.
And they're collapsible.
And they fold down into a very compact shape. Well, with the materials that they had of that day, this is that type of basket that folded up.
Just think of how it would be now today. Call up local McDonald's out. I need 10,000 Big Macs and I need them in 25 minutes. Can you deliver, please?
DoorDash to the rescue.
The number surprised me because other translations say 5,000 plus women and children.
Right.
This says 5,000 total.
I did not research that. I did notice that, Susan.
Okay.
That in the other Gospels they say 5,000 men, and there are women and children that were obviously there. Some speculating that the total number of people might have been more than 10,000 people.
Easily.
Be that as it may, there was a large crowd there, and without Jesus' intervention, they weren't going to be fed. And so something needed to be done to preserve peace there. 12 baskets. If you think about it, it's probably obvious. 12 disciples, 12 baskets. And when it says that Jesus distributed the food, it's assumed, or I guess commentator, I did not research this, but here again, Barclay is saying that the Jesus blessed it and gave the food to the disciples to distribute. So it was the disciples were doing the actual work of the ministry that day of feeding the people. And the leftover pieces is not the crumbs. The leftover pieces are where somebody might have taken and broken a loaf of bread, small loaf of bread in half and only ate half of it, or broken one of the fish in half and only ate half of it, or a part of it. That was the type of leftovers that they were gathering up. And they filled 12 baskets with that. Just another way of pointing out that there was more than enough food for them to eat. And then they move on to the walking on water. And here again, Barclay offers up a way of understanding this miracle in a way that you can get your mind around. And I struggle with his simplifying the miracle in this way. But he says that there was a wind blowing through the night, and that the disciples would not have gone directly across the lake to where they were headed. That with the wind blowing, they wouldn't have ventured out into the deep part of the lake. They would have instead gone around the edge of the lake, staying close to shore, as close to shore as they could. They weren't under sail, they were rowing. Said they had rowed all night. And that they look up and Jesus is coming to them. Scripture says he's walking on water. Well, there's a possibility here, as they were coming around like this, that Jesus was there just actually walking on the edge of the lake. And the disciples could not discern that he was not in fact on the water there. I think that's a little far-fetched, because you have Peter getting out of the boat and the other accounts of this, of getting out of the boat and going to Christ, and then losing sight of where he's at, or becoming aware of where he's at and starting to sink into the water, and Christ grabbing hold of him. Here again, I just offer that out there as something that I found that was kind of interesting. The barley, I wanted to go back, barley loaves were the least of the grains that were used to make bread. They were the cheapest, and only the very poor people used the barley loaves. Anybody that had other financial means used other grain to make their bread from. Generally, barley was used to feed the animals there. Also, I meant to say that Andrew brings the boy to Jesus. Andrew, anytime that we see him, is bringing people to Jesus. And the Society of St. Andrew took their name, you may or may not know this, took their name from this incident of Andrew bringing the boy to Jesus, and Jesus using the boy's resources to feed the people that were gathered there. And then we come to the end of this episode here, and that is, it ends with these words. Turn page too soon here. Some boats came from Tiberias near the place where they had eaten the bread over which the Lord had given thanks. Jesus had blessed the food that had been offered up, and here John calls calls our attention back to that these were the people that were there and had eaten the meal that Jesus had blessed and provided for them. Several years, well, it's been probably 30 years ago now, Guidepost published a story, and it was about a ministry group someplace in the Southwest. I don't remember whether it was in Texas, Arizona, or New Mexico, but someplace in one of those border areas that there were, I guess, migrants, people who did not have enough food and would come out to the dump, the town dump, and scavenge for whatever food that they could give. And this ministry group had went out there to provide a meal. I don't remember that it was any particular occasion like Thanksgiving or something like that, but they had gone out there to provide a meal for the people that were out there scavenging. Now, they had done their research. They knew that about how many people they had observed being out there, and they had prepared to feed that many people. And they went out there, and I don't remember the exact words that the writer used, but he indicated that people were coming from everywhere. There were many, many, many more people than they had prepared for. And they didn't know what to do. They set up their serving line and started serving people. And the writer who had participated in this event remarked that everybody that was there got fed. Even though they had not prepared anywhere near enough food, that God's blessing had come and they had been fed that day. Any thoughts or comments about these miracles and about giving thanks as we approach Thanksgiving here?
Oftentimes in miracles, the miracle is timing. If you have water come at this time, it's great. If you have water come at this time, it's not. So coming here, it might be a miracle. Here it's a disaster. So a miracle oftentimes is in timing.
Timing and location.
Mm-hmm. Does that make it less of a miracle? No. It's still a miracle.
I was talking with a friend in Vermont this past week and commented about that we just had some rain down here, and he said, I wish you'd send it up here. Where he's at in Vermont, they haven't had any rain yet. At least as of Wednesday, they had not had any rain yet. In the time that we've been without rain.
Give them another 6 weeks, they'll have snow.
Well, according to the long-range forecast, some of our areas are going to have some snow flurries this week. They said the ski areas probably would experience some snow
Well,
flurries.
shoot, I toured Colorado and all, they're already getting 2 feet of snow.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that. And the only time I can walk on water is in the winter when it's froze.
I talked to Virginia.
But I have to watch soft spots I might sink in if I lose focus.
I talked to Farn last week, and she said it never laid on the roads out there. That they hadn't treated them. She's north of Denver. They hadn't treated them, but it just didn't lay on the roads. It laid in the deep in the grass, but not in the roads.
Okay.
But coming south from Denver and the southeast area of Colorado, they really got dumped on.
When we went out west a number of years ago, what surprised me was seeing gates on highways, interstates, in which they blocked it off. You couldn't travel on interstates. And I'm thinking,
Sort of like our hurricane gates.
yeah, but I'd never seen an interstate blocked off. It's like, okay.
Well, we've gotten off subject here. We'll see where Pastor Dawn goes, giving thanks. And as you prepare for Thanksgiving, hope that you'll be joining us for these messages, but also remember that give thanks to God, and may God's blessings be upon you.